There was a time, not so very long ago, when the city of Tashkent was the finest city in the world. Its gardens were elegant, its mosque was glorious, its palace was magnificent, and its caliph was young and handsome and rich and powerful and bored. So bored was the young Caliph that he sent out a proclamation across the whole city of Tashkent that whoever came to him with something he had never seen or done before, something really amazing, would win a great reward. It wasn't long before a stranger came to the palace gates. The stranger had a long dark beard, a long dark cloak, and a dusty bag over his shoulder. Now strangers were nothing unusual in Tashkent. The Silk Road brought strangers from all over the world. All kinds of exotic characters walked the city's streets, and so the Caliph didn't think twice. He invited the stranger in. The stranger said he was a wizard, and he said that he had something for the Caliph that he promised would be truly amazing. He produced from his bag a box no bigger than the palm of his hand, opened the lid, and showed the Caliph what was inside. The Caliph looked. "But it's just black dust," he said. "Oh, no, your Majesty," said the wizard. "No, it's not just dust. It's snuff. One pinch of this snuff. Think of an animal. Say the magic word, mutabur, and you will turn into that animal. And that's not all. You will be able to understand the language of all the animals." That did sound really amazing, and the Caliph took the box and was about to sniff the snuff when he suddenly realized he was about to fall into a terrible trap. "Wizard," he said, "what do I have to do to turn back into a human again?" "Oh, your Majesty," said the wizard, "I'm so sorry. Did I forget to mention?" "Yes, it's easy. What you do, you turn to the east, you bow 3 times, and you say again the magic word, mutabur, and you will turn back into your own human self." Now, perhaps a wiser Caliph would have asked a servant to try the snuff first before he did it himself, but this young Caliph had been very bored for a long time, and so he thought of a lion, the most royal animal he could think of, said mutabur, and he was a lion. He felt the mane sprout from his head and grow and flow down his back. He felt the great heart of a lion thunder in his chest. What a feeling! Oh, this was truly something amazing. In his lion form, he bowed to the east 3 times, and he said, or rather growled, the magic word, mutabur, and there he was, his own human self again. The young Caliph was delighted, and he reached into his pocket to find a bag of gold to give to the wizard, but the wizard said, "Oh, your Majesty, no, no, I haven't come for the reward. The smile on your face is reward enough." The Caliph, with his box of magic snuff in his pocket, went out into the palace gardens, looking around at all the animals to see which one he wanted to turn into next. He walked through the avenue of pomegranate trees, past the plashing fountains, until he came to the great ornamental lake that was the greatest beauty of the palace gardens. And there on the lake he saw a pair of storks. Now these 2 storks were facing each other, with their long beaks clacking and their heads bobbing backwards and forwards, and they were fluffing out their feathers, and they looked like they were having a very interesting conversation. And the Caliph wanted to know what they were talking about. And so he took the snuff, put the box back in his pocket, said the magic word, mutabur, and he was a stork. He felt his nose grow and grow into a long stork's beak. He felt his fingers grow into the long feathers of a stork's wings, and his own legs turned red and spindly like a stork's legs. And as he walked over closer to the two storks on the lake, he could hear their conversation. And it wasn't what he was expecting. It was the most ridiculous conversation he had ever heard in his life. One stork was saying, "Oh, my dear, the dining in this lake. I have just eaten the most exquisite frog. Really, my dear, you must try some. Do let me pick one for you." And the second stork said, "No, no, not for me, not for me. I've told you 100 times I'm on a diet. I'm training for the ballet, don't you remember?" "Oh," said the first stork, "do show me your ballet steps again. You look so wonderful when you're dancing." And the second stork began to dance its storky ballet, fluttering its wings and pirouetting and turning and waving its beak around until it pirouetted so fast on those ridiculous red spindly legs that down it went and fell straight into the pond. It was the biggest slapstick show the Caliph had ever seen, and he just burst out laughing. Well, he thought, that was a lot of fun. I wonder what animal I should turn into now, or maybe I should go back into the palace and have something to eat first. I'll turn back into a human and then I'll come out. What was the magic word again? He couldn't remember it. And as he stood there, clacking his stork beak and trying to remember that magic word, out from behind a tree by the lake there stepped the sly wizard, with a very nasty smile on his face. "Oh, your Majesty," said the wizard, "I've been following you all through the gardens. You know, there was something I forgot to tell you. You were right. What I forgot to say is, if you laugh while you're in the form of an animal, you will forget the magic word, and you will never be able to change back." The Caliph was horror-struck. He begged the wizard to tell him the magic word so that he could become himself again. But of course, all that was happening, that beak was just clacking. And the wizard laughed and walked into the palace, leaving the Stork Caliph to his fate. And what a fate. The Caliph could not remember that magic word. He spent the night racking his brains with no result, and the next day, as he flew up and soared and twirled above the palace, he looked down and he saw his own loyal subjects, his servants, his friends. Looking around for him, they thought that he'd abandoned them. On the second day, he looked down and saw the whole of the city in mourning for the young Caliph it thought it had lost. And on the third day, it saw the new Caliph being crowned. Of course, the new Caliph was the wizard who told them all that he'd come to take the Caliph's place. It broke the young Caliph's heart to look down and see the home, the people, the friends, everything he'd lost. He couldn't bear to stay in Tashkent, and so he flew away out across the plains, over the twinkling river, into the unknown world outside. One day, towards evening, as he flew, he saw in the distance another city. It looked as if it had once been as fine as Tashkent, but now, as he drew near, he could see this city was in ruins. The walls were crumbling. The mosque was falling down. The palace was stained, the marble streaked with dirt and moss. And as he flew even closer, he heard the most mournful sound. Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo. He followed the sound into the palace, through the corridors and the courtyards, until he reached a tower, and there, on the windowsill, was an owl, the saddest owl he'd ever seen. Hoo hoo, hoo hoo. Whatever is wrong? Said the Stork Caliph to the owl. Why are you so sad? Hoo. I'm not an owl, said the owl, or I shouldn't be. I'm really a princess. I was turned into an owl by a sly wizard. He wanted me to marry him and I refused, and so he turned me into an owl, and he said that the only way anyone could break the spell would be if a human proposed marriage to me. And what human will ever propose to an owl? I'm doomed to stay like this forever. And she cried again. Hoo hoo. Sly wizard, those words meant something to the Caliph, and he told her his story. And between them they worked out that this was the same sly wizard who'd put an evil spell on both of them. But when he got to the part of the story where he forgot the magic word, the owl said, but there might be something we can do here. Because that sly wizard, every dark of the moon, every month, comes back here to this ruined palace with all of his gang of cronies, and they sit in the old banqueting hall, and they drink, and they feast, and they boast, and they joke. And maybe if we listen in, maybe he'll let slip the magic word. It's worth a try. Well, it certainly was worth a try, and the two of them looked up into this night sky and saw that there was no moon. Tonight was the night. The owl took the Stork Caliph through the corridors of the palace and showed him the old banqueting hall, the table in ruins, the floor covered in filth, the tapestries tattered on the walls, and they hid behind one of those shredded tapestries and waited, and waited, and waited. The Stork Caliph was ready to give up. Midnight was long gone. And then they heard the sound of raucous laughter echoing through the halls, and here came, sure enough, the sly wizard, with all of his friends and cronies, and what a rabble they were. Thieves, robbers, wizards, sorcerers, they were a very nasty bunch, and they were half drunk already before they'd even sat down. They sat there at the great ruined banqueting table, and they drank and they ate. They gulped and they glugged. They boasted and laughed and told filthy jokes and sang dirty songs, and at last, when the revelry was at its worst, one of the gang called out to the wizard, Hey, tell us again the story about how you tricked the Caliph. I love hearing that one. Yeah, said the wizard. It's a good one, I'll tell you. And so he began to tell the whole story of the snuff and the trick and the Caliph, and how he was now the ruler of the fine city of Tashkent. And tell us the magic word. What was it? Shouted out one of the gang. Oh, I'm glad you asked, said the sly old wizard. It was a really good one. I'll tell you. It was Mutabur. From behind the tapestry, the Caliph gave a yell of triumph. Of course, he remembered now. Mutabur, that's the word. And so he dashed out from behind the shreds of the tapestry, and he ran on those spindly stork legs as fast as he could across the old banqueting hall and out through the door, with the owl following behind him. And the wizard looked around and saw the stork running and realized what was happening, and he was after them. The Stork Caliph skittered and scattered on his legs, running through the palace corridors, flapping those great wings to try to get out, got lost in the maze, couldn't find his way. In a panic, those great wings flying everywhere, until at last he broke out into a courtyard, and he looked around to find the east so that he could bow 3 times and say the word. but he couldn't find it. It was still dark. The sun hadn't risen. Which way was east? In desperation, he bowed every which way, shouting out, Mutabur, Mutabur, but he didn't find the direction. He was still a stork, and the owl came out behind him. Hoo, 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 so sad and mournful that the plan was going wrong. And here came the wizard with that great sack on his shoulder. And as he came out, he pulled from the bag a bow and arrow, and he took aim and said, Caliph, you've learned the magic word. The only thing I can do to stop you now is to kill you where you fly. He took aim, and at that moment, a great golden light appeared over the rim of the tumble-down wall of the palace courtyard. The sun was rising at last. There was east. The Stork Caliph lost no time. He bowed 3 times in the direction of the sun, and he said the magic word, Mutabur. The wizard, dazzled by the light of the sun, let the arrow fly, but he couldn't see where he was firing, and the arrow went wide. The Caliph, standing now in his own human form, in the same clothes he'd left the palace wearing, pulled off his cloak, took the snuff box from his pocket, threw it at the wizard's feet, and shouted the magic word again, Mutabur. And at the sound of that magic word, the wizard turned into a stork, because that was the last animal he'd thought of. The Caliph threw his cloak over the stork wizard, put his hand around the beak so that the stork couldn't say the word. And then he turned to the owl and said, Dear owl, will you please marry me? Standing in front of him, not an owl, but a princess with amber eyes and tawny hair. The 2 of them, the young Caliph and his princess bride, they made their way back to Tashkent with the stork wizard firmly held inside that cloak. When they got back to the palace, the people were overjoyed to find the Caliph well and happy, and they had a wonderful wedding that lasted for days. You can be sure that wizard stork was down in the deepest dungeon with bands tied around his beak so that he couldn't speak, and with the doors and windows blocked so that he could never see which way was east. And the Caliph and his princess lived happily ever after, and they would often go for a walk in the palace gardens, past the avenue of pomegranates, the plashing fountains, towards the ornamental lake, where they would watch the storks at play. But they let them keep their conversations to themselves. That story was The Stork Caliph. I learned it from Hala, who told it at the World Storytelling Cafe. I really love that story, and Hala made some changes to it that I really think make it even better than the original. Thank you, Hala, for teaching me this lovely, lovely story.